All right, so welcome to our training today, and we are going to be reviewing the LegalServer HUD ARM electronic reporting module and just give you some basic information about that. I do have the ability to ask questions, but we'll hold that off to the end because we are recording this. So you do have questions, please wait until the end to do that. So what is the HUD ARM reporting module? It gives you the ability to collect your data and then electronically report it to the HUD agency reporting module, also known as ARM. This includes the HUD 9902 aggregate data, the agency level data, as well as the case level data on counseling services as well. There are several different configurations that we're going to be talking about today in order to have this module work. I do want to start off by saying that this module has a lot of programming behind it. So for the most part, the module is static. You will not be able to make changes to it. And so just know that up front. But the three things that we're going to be talking about today are the administrative settings, some of the configurations in order to get a case so that it will be reportable to HUD, as well as some of the reports that are available for you to review at the end, and then the process of transmitting the report to HUD as well. So first of all, once the module is enabled on your site, you will be able to go to the admin tab. And if you just put in HUD as a search option, you'll be able to see a bunch of different administrative settings that you'll be able to configure as part of the HUD module. This is a list of all of the different settings, and we're going to go through them individually. But I also wanted to mention that in order to access this, once it's enabled, you do have to use the user role permission for Administrate HUD. That is required. Those who have that checked will be able to see this information. Those who do not have it checked will not be able to see this. And again, it's based upon the user role. It's a user role permission. So first of all, let's go ahead and talk about HUD settings. This is where you put in the information for your agency ID in order to be able to log into the HUD module with their ARM site. You'll notice down at the bottom that it says the configuration and settings will access the HUD production environment. On the live site, on your LegalServer live site, you'll be able to access the production environment, which is where you would want to transmit your live reports. On your demo site, it will automatically access the pilot environment for HUD. So you should have different passwords and logins for both environments, and you can set up your demo site to access the pilot environment as well as your live site to access the production site. Of course, these are blank because we don't want to share information, but you would have those individually, and you are able to put those in as you need to. You also have to select what time frame and how you want to pull cases for the report. Generally, it's going to be closed during the time frame, but there are other options for you to choose depending on what HUD is asking you to report. So you're able to pick those four different things, whether it's open during the time frame, whether it's closed during the time frame, or whether it's open during the time frame and currently closed, or whether it was open at any point in the time frame. So you do need to set that up as well. Some of the other agency settings that are going to be required, there are the HUD agency data. That's where you put in your name and address. This is information that HUD has on you, as well as your agency contact. So that includes your HUD contact, your office manager, and your office executive. You also are now required to put in your agency counselors. This is a new requirement from HUD that you do have to have the HUD counselor ID in there. So these top three settings for the agency are required. They will be transmitted to HUD when you hit the transmit button. And if they're not entered correctly, you will get an error so that it will not be transmitted. The other setting that you have, I've just italicized, and that's because it's not required. It's only there in case you find it helpful. This will list all of the HUD data fields that are going to be in the report, and you can set defaults for the agency with these defaults and or overrides. It may be helpful, it may not. Some of the things in there, of course, are the client names, which would not be amenable to defaulting or overriding likely. But things like the purpose of the visit, if you always only do the same thing with HUD, you could enter that here and it would just automatically populate that field so that you wouldn't have to do it on every single case. So that might be helpful, but all of these agency settings should be set up in the background. And again, this is all located under admin. tab, and then if you search for HUD, you will see all of these different settings. The next thing you have to do is identify the cases that are going to be reported to HUD. There are a couple of configurations on your cases that you'll want to make sure that you set up. The first one is that your certified counselor has to be an assignment on the case. Again, this is a new requirement from HUD, but they are requiring that you have a certified counselor working on the case. And so the system will not pull any case where a certified counselor has not been assigned. So you do need to make sure to make that assignment and make sure that one of your certified counselors with a HUD ID is attached to each case. The other thing that you'll need is an auxiliary form that you can create that has some fields on it. Up at the top of this form, we have the HUD eligible and the HUD Form 9902 eligible field. If those are not marked yes for the 90902 report, they will not be part of the report. So you do need to make sure that you do that. There is some additional information that you can change as far as the HUD race, HUD ethnicity, and the limited English proficiency, which is required. And then down below, you notice there's also the HUD ARM data and case overrides. This is a block that LegalServer has, and we do recommend using the block as opposed to trying to put in the individual fields. This block allows you to, it will pull in the case data if there is case data for that. For instance, on that top one, you see the client's intake date is the same as the intake date in the system. So that will get pulled in automatically. You can actually edit the case data if it is the case by clicking that edit case data there and change that date if you need to. It will change the date not only for the HUD report, but also in that field as well. So anytime you click edit case data, it will actually be editing the case data as well. You could change it to an override. So you could override it with something else as well. You'll notice that this will also tell you whether or not there is an override. So if the field is overridden by that other settings that we talked about, it will allow you to do that. It will allow you to remove the override, however, and put in the information that you need to for this particular case if you do have an override. But this will give you the information. All of these fields that you see here, and there's a lot more that I didn't screenshot in here, but it's going to be all of the fields that are going to be required for the report, and you'll have all of those options. You'll want to come here and review that data, make sure it's accurate for each case that you want reported. If there's a required field that's not in here, then you're going to get an error again when we go to transmit it. And so you do want to make sure that for all of the cases that you're marking as eligible, that the information in the data down here below is correct. I did pull a screenshot of the back end of the form as well, mainly just again to mention that the HUD ARM module is very static because of all the programming behind it. So there's not changes that you can make to it, but that is the best way to make sure that the information is on each case. So you want to use that block and those additional fields to make sure that you record all the information that you need for the report on each case. Once that's recorded, then you can go back to your admin tab and you can pull reports to see what cases have been pulled into the report, as well as then transmit it to HUD as well. First of all, you have the review cases to be reported. Again, it's under the admin tab. So if you go to admin and go to review cases to be reported, you'll be able to see the report periods. The report periods is a drop-down list that LegalServer does. So it will change from year to year. We've just ended the fourth quarter of the HUD report. So we'll be updating these to 2021 and then the other quarters. But you can see what those quarters are. So you can pick the quarter that you're selecting for reporting. And then you can either get the cases for the selected period, or you can also generate an Excel sheet, which will pull in the cases. The get cases for the selected period will bring up a list view down below of all of the cases and tell you whether or not that case is valid or not to be reported, so that you'll be able to see whether or not there's some missing information that the system has flagged that's not going to make this reportable and or give you an error. You can also pull it into an Excel sheet as well, either with the raw Excel data or also with labels. You can also review your Form 9902 report. Again, you have to select that quarter, and again, that is static, so you don't have the ability to change those. That's done by LegalServer. But once you pick your quarter, you can review that period, and then your 9902 report will come up on a separate screen showing you the numbers that are going to be in that 9902 report. So here again, it's just the beginning parts of that report, but you would be able to go through each different section of the report and see the cumulative data for the report, as well as all of the numbers that are there. These should be the same as the cases that you reviewed, as well as the cases that were pulled into the Excel sheet, but that is something to check to make sure that those numbers are coming up as the same numbers. Once you review those reports and think that they're good, you can then transmit your report to HUD. Again, this is under the admin tab, and it can be transmitted by going to here, picking the period, and then hitting continue. You will also notice that there is a list view of previous transmissions. So you'll be able to see all of your transmissions down below, as well as review those transmissions. So you don't lose your transmissions once it's been reported. You will be able to see those as well. So on this particular one, you'll see that there's 43 there. I didn't list them because of confidential information, but you will be able to access any previous reports as well. Once you're ready to, once you've selected your um, report period, you can then hit continue. And once you hit continue, you'll be able to review the transmission. Again, you'll be able to see different types of information, what quarter you're pulling, when the transmission date is, the number of agency contacts, the number of counselors, and the number of cases that are being reported. Once that seems correct, you can hit generate data, and the data will be generated and then transmitted to HUD. If there is an issue as it's generating the data, you will potentially get a report or a success rate. I did this one. You'll notice that it does say that there was an error in this transmission, and it's asking you to send an error report to LegalServer. If you have worked with HUD at all for any length of time, you'll probably know that HUD does change the requirements for the reporting quite often. We do get notice of those changes, and we do try to accommodate them. But every once in a while, you may end up with a new requirement that we didn't catch. So you will want to make sure that you start working on your report and transmitting it earlier rather than waiting for the last day of the report, so that if there are any errors, we can fix that. But this will give you a success or error rate. And once it's successfully transmitted, you can then log in into your HUD portal and review the report. It should tell you that it's there. My understanding is you do have to validate the report once it's been there. So once it's been transmitted, you do need to log into your HUD portal, validate the report, and then it will be done for that period of time. And that is essentially how the HUD ARM module works in LegalServer. Any questions?